The canton of Aargau, sometimes anglicized Argovia, see also other names, is one of the more northerly cantons of Switzerland. It is situated by the lower course of the Aare, which is why the canton is called Aar-gau. It is one of the most densely populated regions of Switzerland. History. Early history. The area of Aar-gau and the surrounding areas were controlled by the Helvetians, a member of the Celts, as far back as 200 BC, eventually being occupied by the Romans and then by the 6th century, the Franks. The Romans built a major settlement called Vindenissa near the present location of Brugg. Medieval Aar-gau. In early medieval times, the Aar-gau was a disputed border region between the duchies of Alemannia and Burgundy. A line of the von Wetterau intermittently held the countship of Aar-gau from 750 until about 1030, when they lost it. From the extinction in 1254 of the Hohenstaufen dynasty until 1415, the area was ruled by the Habsburgs, and many castles from that time still stand. The Habsburgs founded a number of monasteries, the closing of which by the government in 1841 was a contributing factor to the outbreak of the Swiss Civil War, the Sonderbund War, in 1847. Under the Swiss Confederation, when Frederick IV of Habsburg sided with anti-Pope John XXIII at the Council of Constance, Emperor Sigismund placed him under the imperial ban. In July 1414, the Pope visited Bern and received assurances from them that they would move against the Habsburgs. A few months later, the Swiss Confederation denounced the Treaty of 1412. Shortly thereafter, in 1415, Bern and the rest of the Swiss Confederation used the ban as a pretext to invade the Aar-gau. The Confederation was able to quickly conquer the towns of Aare, Lenzburg, Brugg and Zofingen along with most of the Habsburg castles. Bern kept the southwest portion, northward to the confluence of the Aare and Reuss. The important city of Baden was taken by a united Swiss army and governed by all 8 members of the Confederation. Some districts named the Freiämter, Mellingen, Muri, Vilmergen, and Bremgarten, with the Countship of Baden, were governed as subject lands by all or some of the Confederates. Shortly after the conquest of the Aar-gau by the Swiss, Frederick humbled himself to the Pope. The Pope reconciled with him and ordered all of the taken lands to be returned. The Swiss refused, and years later, after no serious attempts at reacquisition, the Duke officially relinquished rights to the Swiss. Unteraargau-Berner Aar-gau. Bern's portion of the Aar-gau came to be known as the Unteraargau, though can also be called the Berner or Bernese Aar-gau. In 1514, Bern expanded north into the Jura and came into possession of several strategically important mountain passes into the Austrian Frichtel. This land was added to the Unteraargau and was directly ruled from Bern. It was divided into 7 rural bailiwicks and 4 administrative cities, Aare, Zofingen, Lenzburg and Brugg. While the Habsburgs were driven out, many of the minor nobles were allowed to keep the lands and offices, though over time they lost power to the Bernese government. The bailiwick administration was based on a very small staff of officials, mostly made up of Bernese citizens but with a few locals. When Bern converted during the Protestant Reformation in 1528, the Unteraargau also converted. At the beginning of the 16th century, a number of Anabaptists migrated into the upper Wiener and Ruhr valleys from Zurich. Despite pressure from the Bernese authorities in the 16th and 17th centuries, Anabaptism never entirely disappeared from the Unteraargau. Bern used the Aar-gau bailiwicks mostly as a source of grain for the rest of the city-state. The administrative cities remained economically only of regional importance. However, in the 17th and 18th centuries, Bern encouraged industrial development in Unteraargau, and by the late 18th century it was the most industrialized region in the city-state. The high industrialization led to high population growth in the 18th century. For example, between 1764 and 1798, the population grew by 35%, far more than in other parts of the canton. In 1870, the proportion of farmers in Aare, Lenzburg, Kulm, and Zofingen districts was 34 to 40%, while in the other districts it was 46 to 57%. Freiämter. The rest of the Freiämter were collectively administered as subject territories by the rest of the Confederation. Uri-Amt was assigned to Zurich, Lucerne, Schwyz, and Tlerwalden, Zug and Glarus, while the Ämter of Marnburg, Richensee and Vilmergen were first given to Lucerne alone. The final boundary was set in 1425 by an arbitration tribunal, and Lucerne had to give the three Ämter to be collectively ruled. The four Ämter were then consolidated under a single confederation bailiff into what was known in the 15th century as the Wagental bailiwick. In the 16th century, it came to be known as the Vote der Freien Ämter. While the Freien Ämter often had independent lower courts, they were forced to accept the Confederation's sovereignty. Finally, in 1532, the Canton of Aare became part of the collective administration of the Freien Ämter. At the time of Reformation, the majority of the Ämter converted to the new faith. In 1529, a wave of iconoclasm swept through the area and wiped away much of the old religion. After the defeat of Zurich in the Second Battle of Kappel in 1531, the victorious 5 Catholic cantons marched their troops into the Freiämter and reconverted them to Catholicism. In the First War of Vilmergen in 1656 and the Toggenburg War in 1712, the Freiämter became the staging ground for the warring Reformed and Catholic armies. While the peace after the 1656 war did not change the status quo, the Fourth Peace of Aare in 1712 brought about a reorganization of power relations. The victory gave Zurich the opportunity to force the Catholic cantons out of the government in the county of Baden and the adjacent area of the Freiämter. The Freiämter were then divided in two by a line drawn from the gallows in Farawang and to the Oberlunkerhofen church steeple. The northern part, the so-called Unteren Freiämter, which included the districts of Boswil and Hermechville and the Niederum, were ruled by Zurich, Bern and Glarus. The southern part, the Oberen Freiämter, were ruled by the previous 7 cantons, but Bern was added to make an 8. During the Helvetic Republic, the county of Baden, the Freiämter and the area known as the Kellerum were combined into the Canton of Baden. County of Baden. The County of Baden was a shared condominium of the entire old Swiss Confederacy. After the Confederacy conquest in 1415, they retained much of the Habsburg legal structure, which caused a number of problems. The local nobility had the right to hold the low court in only about 1/5 of the territory. There were over 30 different nobles who had the right to hold courts scattered around the surrounding lands. All these overlapping jurisdictions caused numerous conflicts, but gradually the Confederation was able to acquire these rights in the county. The cities of Baden, Bremgarten and Mellingen became the administrative centers and held the high courts. Together with the courts, the 3 administrative centers had considerable local autonomy, but were ruled by a governor who was appointed by the Acht every 2 years. After the Protestant victory at the Second Battle of Vilmergen, the administration of the county changed slightly. Instead of the Acht appointing a bailiff together, Zurich and Bern each appointed the governor for 7 out of 16 years, while Glarus appointed him for the remaining 2 years. The chaotic legal structure and fragmented land ownership, combined with the tradition of dividing the land among all the heirs in an inheritance, prevented any large-scale reforms. The governor tried in the 18th century to reform and standardize laws and ownership across the county, but with limited success. With an ever-changing administration, the county lacked a coherent long-term economic policy or support for reforms. By the end of the 18th century, there were no factories or mills and only a few small cottage industries along the border with Zurich. Road construction first became a priority after 1750, when Zurich and Bern began appointing a governor for 7 years. During the Protestant Reformation, some of the municipalities converted to the new faith. However, starting in 1531, some of the old parishes were converted back to the old faith. The governors were appointed from both Catholic and Protestant cantons, and since they changed every 2 years, neither faith gained a majority in the county. The county was the only federal condominium in the 17th century where Jews were tolerated. In 1774, they were restricted to just 2 towns, ending in Langnau, while the rural upper class tried several times to finally expel the Jews. The financial interests of the authorities prevented this. The Jews were directly subordinate to the governor starting in 1696, when they were forced to buy a protecting and shielding letter every 16 years for the governor. After the French invasion on the 19th of March 1798, the governments of Zurich and Bern agreed to the creation of the short-lived Canton of Baden in the Helvetic Republic. With the Act of Mediation in 1803, the Canton of Baden was dissolved. Portions of the lands of the former County of Baden now became the District of Baden in the newly created Canton of Aargau. After World War II, this formerly agrarian region saw striking growth and became the district with the largest and densest population in the canton, forming the Canton of Aargau. The contemporary Canton of Aargau was formed in 1803, a canton of the Swiss Confederation as a result of the Act of Mediation. It was a combination of 3 short-lived cantons of the Helvetic Republic, Aargau, Baden and Frichtel. Its creation is therefore rooted in the Napoleonic era. In the year 2003, the Canton of Aargau celebrated its 200th anniversary. French forces occupied the Aargau from the 10th of March to the 18th of April 1798. Thereafter the Bernese portion became the Canton of Aargau and the remainder formed the Canton of Baden. Aborted plans to merge the two halves came in 1801 and 1802, and they were eventually united under the name Aargau, which was then admitted as a full member of the reconstituted Confederation following the Act of Mediation. Some parts of the Canton of Baden at this point were transferred to other cantons. The Amt of It skirched Lucerne, whilst Huttichen, Huttwil and Aire-Limit, Dietikon and Schlieren went to Zurich. In return, Lucerne's Amt of Marenschwand was transferred to Aargau. The Frichtel, ceded in 1802 by Austria via Napoleonic France to the Helvetic Republic, was briefly a separate canton of the Helvetic Republic under a Statthalter, but on the 19th of March 1803 was incorporated into the Canton of Aargau. The former cantons of Baden and Frichtel can still be identified with the contemporary districts. The Canton of Baden is covered by the districts of Zurzach, Baden, Bremgarten, Amuri, the Canton of Frichtel by the districts of Rheinfelden and Laufenburg. Chief Magistracy. The Chief Magistracy of Aargau changed its style repeatedly, first 2 consecutive Regierungsstatthalter, April 1798, November 1801, Jacob Emanuel Fehr 1802–1803, Johann Heinrich Rothpletz, President of the Government Commission, the 10th of March 1803 to 26 April 1803, Johann Rudolf Dulder, the 20 26th of April 1803 to 1815, a small council, annual Amtsbürgermeister 1815 to 1831, annual Landammann since 1815. The Jewish history in Aar-gau. In the 17th century, Jews were banished from Switzerland. However, a few families were permitted to live in two villages, Endingen and Lengnau, in Aar-gau, which became the Jewish ghetto in Switzerland. During this period, Jews and Christians were not allowed to live under the same roof. Neither were Jews allowed to own land or houses. They were taxed at a much higher rate than others, and, in 1712, the Lengnau community was pillaged. Quote, in 1760, they were further restricted regarding marriages and multiplying. This remained the case until the 19th century. In 1799, all special tolls were abolished, and, in 1802, the poll tax was removed. On the 5th of May 1809, they were declared citizens and given broad rights regarding trade and farming. They were still restricted to Endingen and Lengnau until the 7th of May 1846, when the right to move and reside freely within the Canton of Aargau was granted. On the 24th of September 1856, the Swiss Federal Council granted them full political rights within Aargau, as well as broad business rights. However, the majority Christian population did not abide by these new liberal laws fully. The time of 1860 saw the canton government voting to grant suffrage in all local rights and to give the communities autonomy. Before the law was enacted, it was repealed due to vocal opposition led by the Ultramontane Party. Finally, the federal authorities in July 1863 granted all Jews full rights of citizens. However, they did not receive all of the rights in Endingen and Len until a resolution of the Grand Council on the 15th of May 1877 granted citizens' rights to the members of the Jewish communities of those places, giving them charters under the names of New Endingen and New Lengnau. The Swiss Jewish culture of Aare was instrumental in this fight from its founding in 1862 until it was dissolved 20 years later. During this period of diminished rights, they were not even allowed to bury their dead in Swiss soil and had to bury their dead on an island called Judenol on the Rhine near Waldstadt. Beginning in 1603, the deceased Jews of the Serbtal communities were buried on the river island, which was leased by the Jewish community, as the island was repeatedly flooded and devastated. In 1750, the Serbtal Jews asked the Tagsatzung to establish the Endingen cemetery in the vicinity of the communities. Geography. The capital of the canton is Aare, which is located on its western border on the Aare. The canton borders Germany to the north, the Rhine forming the border. To the west lie the Swiss cantons of Basel-Landschaft, Solothurn and Bern. The canton of Lucerne lies south, and Zurich and Zug to the east. Its total area is 1,404 square kilometers. It contains both large rivers, the Aare and the Reuss. The canton of Aargau is one of the least mountainous Swiss cantons, forming part of a great tableland, to the north of the Alps and the east of the Jura, above which rise low hills. The surface of the country is beautifully diversified, undulating tracts and well-wooded hills alternating with fertile valleys watered mainly by the Aare and its tributaries. The valleys alternate with pleasant hills, most of which are full of woods. Slightly over 1/3 of the canton is wooded, while nearly half is used from farming. 33.5 square kilometers, or about 2.4% of the canton, is considered unproductive, mostly lakes and streams. With a population density of 450 per square kilometers, the canton has a relatively high amount of land used for human development, with 216.7 square kilometers, or about 15% of the canton, developed for housing or transportation. population. It contains the famous hot sulfur springs of Baden and Schinsnigbad, while at Rheinfelden there are very extensive saline springs. Just below Brugg the Reuss and the Limit join the Aar, while around Brugg are the ruined castle of Habsburg, the old convent of Königsfelden and the remains of the Roman settlement of Vandenisse. Fahr Abbey forms a small exclave of the canton, otherwise surrounded by the canton of Zurich, and since 2008 is part of the Aargau municipality of Rheinlose. Political subdivisions. Districts. Aargau is divided into 11 districts: Aare with capital Aare, Baden with capital Baden, Bremgarten with capital Bremgarten, Brugg with capital Brugg, Kulm with capital Unterkam, Laufenburg with capital Laufenburg, Lenzburg with capital Lenzburg, Muri with capital Muri, Rheinfelden with capital Rheinfelden, Zofingen with capital Zofingen, Zurzach with capital Zurzach. The most recent change in district boundaries occurred in 2010 when Hotwil transferred from Brugg to Laufenburg, following its merger with other municipalities, all of which were in Laufenburg. Municipalities. There are 213 municipalities in the Canton of Aargau. As with most Swiss cantons, there has been a trend since the early 2000s for municipalities to merge, though mergers in Aargau have so far been less radical than in other cantons. Coat of arms. The blazon of the coat of arms is purple, dexter, sable, efface wavy argent, charged with 2 cat eyes is wavy azure, sinister, sky blue, 3 mullets of 5 argent. The flag and arms of Aargau date to 1803 and are an original design by Samuel Ringier seal matter. The current official design, specifying the stars as 5-pointed, dates to 1930. Demographics. Aargau has a population of 645,277. As of 2010, 21.5% of the population are resident foreign nationals. Over the last 10 years the population has changed at a rate of 11%. Migration accounted for 8.7%, while births and deaths accounted for 2.8%. Most of the population speaks German as the first language. Italian is the second most common and Serbo-Croatian is the third. There are 4,151 people who speak French and 618 people who speak Romansh. Of the population in the canton, 146,421 or about 26.7% were born in Aargau and lived there in 2000. There were 140,768 or 25.7% who were born in the same canton, while 136,865 or 25.0% were born somewhere else in Switzerland, and 107,396 or 19.6% were born outside of Switzerland. As of 2000, children and teenagers make up 24.3% of the population, while adults make up 62.3% and seniors make up 13.4%. As of 2000, there were 227,656 people who were single and never married in the canton. There were 264,939 married individuals, 27,603 widows or widowers and 27,295 individuals who are divorced. As of 2000, there were 224,128 private households in the canton, and an average of 2.4 persons per household. There were 69,062 households that consist of only one person and 16,254 households with 5 or more people. As of 2009, the construction rate of new housing units was 6.5 new units per 1,000 residents. The vacancy rate for the canton in 2010 was 1.54%. The majority of the population is centered on one of three areas: the Aare Valley, the side branches of the Aare Valley, or along the Rhine. Historic population. The historical population is given in the following chart. Politics. In the 2011 federal election, the most popular party was the SVP, which received 34.7% of the vote. The next three most popular parties were the SPPS, the FDP and the CVP. The SVP received about the same percentage of the vote as they did in the 2007 federal election. The SPS retained about the same popularity. The FDP retained about the same popularity and the CVP retained about the same popularity. Politics. Federal election results: FDP before 2009 FDP. B** indicates that the party was not on the ballot in this canton. C part of the GPS religion. From the 2000 census, 219,840.1% were Roman Catholic, while 189,606 (34.6%) belonged to the Swiss Reformed Church. Of the rest of the population, there were 11,523 members of an Orthodox church. There were 3,418 individuals who belonged to the Christian Catholic Church, and there were 29,580 individuals who belonged to another Christian church. There were 342 individuals who were Jewish, and 30,072 who were Islamic. There were 1,463 individuals who were Buddhist, 2,089 individuals who were Hindu, and 495 individuals who belonged to another church. 57,573 belonged to no church, are agnostic or atheist, and 15,875 individuals did not answer the question. Education. In Aar-gau, about 212,069 or of the population have completed non-mandatory upper secondary education, and 70,896 have completed additional higher education. Of the 70,896 who completed tertiary schooling, 63.6% were Swiss men, 20.9% were Swiss women, 10.4% were non-Swiss men, and 5.2% were non-Swiss women. Economy. As of 2010, Aar-gau had an unemployment rate of 3.6%. As of 2008, there were 11,436 people employed in the primary economic sector and about 3,927 businesses involved in this sector. 95,844 people were employed in the secondary sector and there were 6,055 businesses in this sector. 177,782 people were employed in the tertiary sector, with 21,530 businesses in this sector. In 2008, the total number of full-time equivalent jobs was 238,225. The number of jobs in the primary sector was 7,167, of which 6,731 were in agriculture, 418 were in forestry or lumber production, and 18 were in fishing or fisheries. The number of jobs in the secondary sector was 90,274, of which 64,089 were in manufacturing, 366 were in mining, and 21,705 were in construction. The number of jobs in the tertiary sector was 140,784. In the tertiary sector, 38,793 or 27.6% were in the sale or repair of motor vehicles, 13,624 or 9.7% were in the movement and storage of goods, 8,150 or 5.8% were in a hotel or restaurant, 5,164 or 3.7% were in the information industry, 5,946 or 4.2% were the insurance or financial industry, 14,831 or 10.5% were technical professionals or scientists, 10,951 or 7.8% were in education, and 21,952 or 15.6% were in health care. Of the working population, 19.5% used public transportation to get to work, and 55.3% used a private car. Public transportation, bus and train, is provided by Busbetriebe Aare. The farmland of the Canton of Aargau is some of the most fertile in Switzerland. Dairy farming, cereal and food farming are among the canton's main economic activities. The canton is also industrially developed, particularly in the fields of electrical engineering, precision instruments, iron, steel, cement and textiles. 3 of Switzerland's 5 nuclear power plants are in the Canton of Aargau. Additionally, the many rivers supply enough water for numerous hydroelectric power plants throughout the canton. The Canton of Aargau is often called the Energy Canton. A significant number of people commute into the financial center of the city of Zurich, which is just across the cantonal border. As such, the per capita cantonal income is 49,209 Swiss francs. Tourism is significant, particularly for the hot springs at Baden and Schinsnigbad, the ancient castles, the landscape, and the many old museums in the canton. Hill walking is another tourist attraction but is of only limited significance.